Did you have a beard like 2 days ago?
Yeah.
The time is 7 o'clock, and we'll call the meeting to order, November 25th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Is Reverend Mike Cheek here this evening? Okay, tonight's, did he say, somebody say here? No.
No.
Tonight's invocation will be given by Elaine McCloskey, our clerk, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand all.
Please bow your heads. Lord, in order that we may live peaceful and quiet lives and in all godliness and holiness, and that all people will come to a knowledge of the truth. I pray for our governmental leaders and all those in authority. Lord, protect and defend those who are called to protect and defend us. And Lord, please look over Councilman Chris Jones, his son Graham, and his family, and show them their strength and that their faith will carry them through. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And now, American Heritage Girls, will you lead us in the pledge, please? Please.
Go on.
Ask yourselves that all the time.
Sign them up.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, girls, very much. We'll give you a minute. You girls, you can all leave. Thank you very, very much, girls.
Yeah. That's controlled chaos right there.
You want to stay? They're crying.
All of a
Stay.
sudden, there's no one in the gallery.
There's a hallway
Actually
full.
really clears that quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, we do have, what, 2 public hearings? One?
Somebody's crying. If they want to stay, they can stay.
Elaine, please give me one of these. I don't know. Okay. It's critical for the space situation. And the surface. Is that yours? Yeah.
Item 4 is the approval of the motion summary of regular meetings of City Council held November 11th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
Second?
Have approval, motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. And then the approval of the motion summary of the organizational meeting of council held on November 18th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
Move for approval.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting held on September 11th, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting held on September 17th, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item C, resolution number 19-50, a resolution appointing the initial city-appointed member of the Board of Directors of the Berkshire Township Joint Economic Development District Number 2.
Thank you. What is the wish of council on the consent agenda?
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, and public comments for anything that's not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of it and move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have none.
Mrs. Keller?
I have none.
You two don't have any yet. Don't worry, we'll get to that. Mr. Hellinger?
I have none.
Mr. Schaefer? All righty, let's do the director's update. Tonight, Dave Eflin with Planning and Community Development Director.
Okay, I think the tradition is to come out here when we do this.
A different view for you.
A different view, yeah. It's intimidating. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Well, I know the agenda is long. We won't take too much time here tonight, but did want to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our department. Obviously, we have 2 new council members. And as opposed to our development hearings and budget and all the rest of it, this gives us an opportunity to just kind of tell you about ourselves a little bit. And most of the rest of you know a lot of what we do, and the 2 of you, Drew and Corey, will know about it soon enough. So I just want to say that thank you to Lance Schultz and Jerry Warner on my staff, our leadership team. We've spent the better part of this year, when we're not doing all the rest of our work, thinking about our staffing needs and succession planning. I'll show you a little bit of that coming up, because that is affecting our department here shortly, if not right now. But appreciate their efforts and their time in dedication to that effort. So we have spent quite a lot of time this year thinking about that. It wouldn't be a Dave presentation without showing you some charts and graphs and lots of growth and development. That is, after all, what our department handles the most of. And you've seen these as part of the budget message, and I'm sure you've read that over already. You may not have seen the inspections graph. I haven't shown that one for a while, but it's sort of the same kind of graph. There's been quite a lot going on. And just to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, in terms of population and permits, the base of our population has grown significantly. Council's well aware of this, but just to give you some numbers, since 2000, about 18,000 more people in our community, regardless of whether we have one new development case. Those are the population that we need to serve. About 8,500 people we estimate since 2010, and these are based on permits. Obviously, there's some census data in there as well. So the base is growing pretty significantly, and that has positive impacts like our active and vibrant downtown and population to come and shop and eat and do all that kind of stuff. But it's also population that we all, as all of us department directors, need to serve. Our 10 and 20 year averages for new dwellings, just on that permit metric, is now over 300 per year on both those averages, which is pretty significant. Good growth. It's been good, well-managed growth. You've heard me say that before, and that's what our plans and policies call for. And it's generally a good thing that we are growing. I have worked in a community that struggled for population for the better part of 50 years, and that makes lots of things difficult. Downtown development being one of them, but employment and other types of issues. As you know, and we've been talking about this a lot with our comprehensive plan steering committee, which is just outstanding and represents the community geographically and demographically really well. They've been spending the better part of the year involved and engaged in the comp plan, as has our citizenry. They provide us a lot of good feedback, but Morpsey's latest projections are somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million new people in Central Ohio by 2050. 2050 is a ways out there, but given the growth and development, not just that we're seeing, but other communities in Central Ohio, Columbus included, it's not an unrealistic projection. And again, it's a show of strength of our region, particularly within our state. We're really the only growing region in our state. You could argue the Cincinnati region, of course, that has 3 states involved, so it's a little more complex. And then our programs. We do code enforcement, grants, buildings and inspections, and planning and zoning. But you can see a lot of these graphs, particularly the inspection graphs, are significant and near the peaks. They will be higher than the peaks at the last peak of the housing market. And we anticipate the growth to continue, again, in a managed way, but it's part and parcel of this regional growth that we're seeing. Okay, so some things we don't talk about a whole lot, and I want to take a moment to just really talk about this with you and show it to you maybe a little bit different way. But one of the ways that we've been able, with a very small staff really, to handle the numbers I just showed you over the course of the last 3, 4, 5 years is that we bring a lot of experience within our department in terms of the planning group. And I count myself in that, in these numbers, but we have about 85 years of combined experience amongst 4 staffers. In our buildings and inspections division, kind of an unbelievable 184, 185 years of combined experience. A lot of these guys were contractors for an entire career before they came to us. But when you see inspection numbers of 13,000, you can understand normally 4 inspectors couldn't even come close to handling that volume. So we're blessed that we have that experienced staff. We're lucky. We're a small group, small team, and we have to work very, very hard and closely together. And then code enforcement, obviously, we have 1 code enforcement officer, but Susie has 21 years in code enforcement and law enforcement for us as well. As just one person, I didn't throw in my years and Lance's years and Jerry's years into that would obviously make that number a lot higher. Obviously, our staff is smaller than it was at the peak of the last housing boom. Part of that was going through a great recession, and we understand that. But part of it now is that we're at a point of need of just servicing a base population and servicing our managed growth moving into the future. And the sort of the third pillar of that is this succession planning that I mentioned before. In the buildings and inspections division, we are within the window of 1 to 3 years, and hopefully we can convince Jerry to extend that window a little bit, where 3 out of 4 of those staff members could retire. So that experience that I just mentioned could get up and walk out. In our planning and zoning division, 2 of 4 of our staff are within 4 to 8 years, and of course, with how PERS is changing and those sorts of things, that people need to make the decisions that they need to make for themselves and their family, and that has changed somewhat from when I first entered the field, and you just figured I'll do 30 years in the public sector. Now it's a little bit different, especially with healthcare costs and those sorts of things when you decide to retire. But we're definitely well within the window of some significant experience leaving our community, and so for some change ahead. I also want to highlight for you, and we don't talk a lot about this, but really a thank you and a shout out to Susie and the IT department. We've embraced technology, even with all that experience, which means we've been around for a while. Sometimes we don't necessarily, the presumption is we wouldn't necessarily embrace technology. But we have, and in fact, we've gone to iPads and tablets in the field to conduct inspections. We're really fully utilizing, and will continue to do so, maximize our CityWorks permitting software and tracking software. And Rachel in GIS has been invaluable in that effort, and also just in GIS and mapping and helping us visualize what's going on with our community. So we really appreciate IT and Susie. But I wanted to highlight that for you without showing you the details. So who are we? Some of my staff, I told them about this presentation, and I asked them that if they felt compelled and they had time this evening, that maybe they would arrive here today and put some faces with the names and the experience, particularly for our 2 new council members. And I think I have a number of staff that determined on their own time they felt this was important enough to do that. So guys, if when I call your name, if you could just stand up and remain standing for a second, I would appreciate it. We have Julie Harding, who's the face of our department at the public window. She's really the permit expediter, our administrative assistant, do it all for all of us, and is usually the one answering the phone when any of you all call. In our Buildings and Inspections division, we have our outstanding Chief Building Official, Jerry Warner, who is here tonight. Thank you, Jerry. Kevin Wilson, who was with us and then went to POW and then smartly came back to the city of Delaware. Kevin couldn't make it tonight, I think. We have Larry Ely, who I know Larry's here. He was an inspector with Delaware County and then came over to us, and we're very appreciative of having Larry with us. Larry is also a Vietnam vet, so we appreciate his service. We have Marvin Phipps, who's our electrical inspector, as well as a residential 1, 2, and 3 family inspector as well. Code enforcement is Susie Martin. I believe she's here tonight. So we appreciate Susie's efforts. Very difficult job every day. I get, I was going to say complaints, but I get suggestions and comments from you all the time. And Susie usually has to go and see if those are what those are all about for us. So we appreciate that. In planning, zoning, and grants, we have Lance Schultz, Planning and Zoning Administrator. He's here this evening. I know many of you know Lance. Diane Gunther, who is just an incredible grant expert in the region, in the state really, and on a number of state boards. And she's sick tonight, or else she would have been here. And Jordan Selmack, who I know has appeared before council as well. So, this is, more than half of the staff handling the numbers that you just saw. So, our work would not be possible without these people. So you can sit down. He can stand. You can sit. So who we work with, I just wanted to show you kind of a list of the diversity of groups and people that we work with on a daily basis. Did I put city council up there? Should have put elected officials. There you go. That's you. And of course, we service the commissions of the Planning Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, and the Board of Zoning Appeals traditionally as well. We're happy to do that. It's important work that those citizen planners really provide for our community. But you can see that it's a diverse day from when we get in to when we leave, and sometimes even after we leave and before we get in. So a lot of times, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about this, kind of the why. Why are we here doing this as part of our role with the city? In terms of planning and buildings and inspections, there's state enabling legislation from Ohio that allows municipalities to perform these functions of planning and platting and buildings and inspections, and to have, we really are blessed to have a local buildings and inspections department that really makes it much more, we're able to bring it much more down to the local level rather than relying on state inspectors, for example, to perform those functions. And at the volume that we're seeing, wouldn't be practical, in my opinion, to do it any other way. Police power is really because all of those powers in enabling legislation derive from what are known as the police power. You can think of that as the health, safety, and welfare of the community. That's another way to say that. Other parts of why we really think that part of our role is the efficient use of resources. I just described a lot of that to you. Certainly just the number of staff described that to you, I think. Part of our role is to help maintain property values and investment values and to balance growth and development with those things as well. And to help implement the vision of the community as expressed in our policies and our plans, our strategic plans, of course, our comprehensive plan that we're going through that process now. We are also, a part of what we do is contained within the city charter for planning, zoning, and platting. And that is fairly typical for a home rule city. It's not necessarily typical that a department would be described within the charter. And lastly, I've showed this to the Citizen Academy, and I know some of you have seen it and gone through Citizen Academy. But this is really how we view kind of the life cycle of planning and community development. It starts with planning and our expression of our vision and policies. We mostly refer to that in our comprehensive plan, but we also have strategic plans like the Bikeway plan and other plans. That really flows right into pre-development. You have some cases on your agenda tonight, and you usually do on every agenda in terms of the growth and development of the community. That flows into our buildings and inspections and actually construction, getting the development done in the real world on the ground. And then we go into a cycle of enforcement. And sometimes then those sites get to a point of enforcement where we're potentially having to remove a structure. That happens pretty rarely, but doing things that present an opportunity for some new planning, some new pre-development and then development work, and the cycle starts again. So I wanted to kind of show you how we view what we do as more a circle than maybe just linear in terms of our the way that we think about it. So with that, I know the agenda is long, and I'm going to stop and appreciate your time for listening to me ramble on a little bit here tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions of staff. I really appreciate you being here this evening.
Well, I appreciate you all being here. Any questions from council? You guys all do an exceptional job, and I hear it every day, how nice it is to work with the city.
Well, thank you.
Jerry Warner, I hear your name daily. Just what a great guy you are. What are you going to do when he's gone? I just say, I don't want to cross that bridge, but I know it's coming, so we appreciate you. And Susie, everything you do with a smile, so thank you.
Dave, could you just in 90 seconds, Delaware together? The next
90 seconds to go over the comprehensive plan. So Delaware Together is how we branded the comprehensive plan effort that we're going through. We do have a 30-person steering committee that we spent a lot of time asking for volunteers and vetting geographically and demographically on a lot of parameters. Council ended up seeing that and endorsing the steering committee, and man, they have done some great work. Even our national consultant has remarked on how good our steering committee is and really how diverse it is. So that has provided a lot of feedback and a lot of really good feedback that we've had to kind of churn through, in addition to the input, thousands of individual bits of input from our citizens along the process. We're about 3/4 of the way through the process, and we have one more big round of public involvement to go, and that would really be when we have a draft plan with some draft goals and objectives to get then our citizens the feedback on those. That's kind of where we are in the process. We have taken a few more steering committee meetings than we originally anticipated, but that's okay. It's been good. To make sure that we're vetting the process through them as we go along. I really appreciate the fact that we've been able to do that, and that our consultants have been willing to come up and do that as well. And then we have to get with maybe some more focus groups here as we get ready to really draft the plan. So I'm hopeful that you all will agree that we can have an adopted plan, hopefully by no later than the end of the second quarter next year. That's our goal. It's obviously a big task, but I think what we're really doing is in this current plan, which has served us very, very well, it had about 23 areas of priority growth. That's a lot. And so this plan is really focusing on about 5 primary areas of growth. Some of it infill, some of it not infill, but within our utility boundary, nothing outside of our utility boundary that we've put a sewer plant, a water plant in place for, and that sort of thing. But it's 15 years later, and we're reconceiving some land use opportunities and really exploring a mixed use in true mixed use in more of a way than maybe we always have in terms of here's subdivision, here's subdivision, here's subdivision, and we don't want anything to mix together, but there certainly seems to be some momentum in that regard. A little more than 90 seconds, but there you go. It's a year and a half process so far.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9 is consideration of some liquor permit transfers. Elaine, if you could please read this into the record.
Consideration of a liquor permit transfer to Pinstripes LLC, doing business as Colony Lanes at 451 Pennsylvania Avenue, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, from Dwight and Patricia Green, doing business as Colony Lanes at 451 Pennsylvania Avenue, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit class D1.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. For consideration is a liquor permit transfer to new owners at Colony Lanes. Just for tonight's purposes with new council persons, Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Farrell, I'll go over a little bit more in detail on the liquor report that we conduct and why we do it, just so you have an understanding. So feel free to ask questions. On the liquor report is what we put together based on the information contained in the legislative notice that we receive. So the top part of that report, you'll see the general information about the permit request and the premise type. So in this instance, we have it's a request for a transfer of a liquor permit, and it is a D1, which is beer on premises or sealed carryout for Colony Lanes located at 451 Pennsylvania Avenue. This is a fairly typical transfer. It's just from one owner to the new owner. But anytime the permit transfers hands, it has to go through this process with the Division of Liquor Control. The next section down that you see is the location information. And the first thing you see is the box titled Churches, Libraries, or Schools Within 500 feet. The Division of Liquor Control is required to notice the legislative authority and also any schools, libraries, or churches within 500 feet, and they have the right to file an objection just as the legislative body does. So they have to file their own objection, but we try to find out what their mindset is, just so you have that for your consideration. We cannot file for them. They're required to turn this same form back in, asking for a hearing on an objection, but we try to let you know what is going on within 500 feet of that location. The other information in there is regarding police reports and calls for service to the location, and whether those calls for service are a drain on our manpower. A lot of times you'll see there are calls for service that are not related to the location, and then sometimes there's calls for service that are related to the location but aren't liquor involved. So, you know, a lot of that will boil down to the question of, is it a drain? And the answer is no. If there's any additional information, it will be on the narrative that's on the back of that report. And then the other information on that section is the Department of Commerce, Division of Liquor Control. They conduct a background and a records check and just basic questions on accessibility and what type of club it is. The next further down is the applicant information. So those are the primary holders of the business that is applying for the permit. And here we just do our local records check. We look for warrants, look for any liquor law violations they may have in their background, any issues that we may have had with them that might cause us to be concerned with their owning a liquor permit at a liquor premise. and we will generally talk with the new permit holders and just kind of inquire about the type of business they're going to operate. So in this case, we don't have any issue with the location. We don't have any issue with the new owners, and our recommendation, which you see at the bottom, is that we do not find a legislative basis to request a hearing to object to the liquor permit. So the two options on the notice indicate we can either request a hearing or we do not request a hearing. So typically, my response in this instance would be just approve this. You can check off that we don't request a hearing, and we can send that in. If we do find something, that last box on the front of the page, there's 10 criteria that we need to find. We need one of those if we want to actually have an objection, and then we have to be able to have evidence to sustain that objection. So very rarely do we recommend objection. We have done that in the past, and we have successfully objected to liquor permits, but most of the time we don't really have that issue. So in this case, we don't have any issues, and my recommendation will be that you approve this as is. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
That's pretty comprehensive.
So what is the wish of council?
We would accept it without objection.
We're doing pen strikes right now?
Pen strikes.
Okay.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. And then item B.
Consideration of a liquor permit transfer to Olivina Tap Room LLC, doing business as Olivino Tap Room at 44 South Sandusky Street, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, from Mystic Golf and Games LLC at 1159 Columbus Pike, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit class D2.
Madam Mayor, members of council, for consideration, this is a liquor transfer, a permit transfer from Mystic Golf and Games, a D2 permit to Olivina at 44 South Sandusky Street. We don't have any issues with the location, no issues with the current owner. We found no basis for a legislative objection, therefore we recommend passage.
Move for approval of the liquor permit.
I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Farrell. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. And I know it's 7:30, but let's go ahead and do item 10 first. If you'll read that in the record, please.
Consideration of a new liquor permit for Olivina Tap Room at LLC, doing business as Olivina Tap Room at 44 South Sandusky Street, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit class D3.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is a request for a new permit, that being the D3 permit for Olivina. Again, we have no issues with the location, no issues with the current owner, and recommend approval.
Chief, what's the difference between a D2 and a D3?
The D2 is wine and mixed beverages for on-premise, and D3 is spirituous liquor, so it's liquor versus wine.
That's good. Move to accept without objection.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you so much. Item 11 is a public hearing. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 19-69, an ordinance making appropriations for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and further to provide lawful appropriations available for expenditure by January 1st, 2020, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Mr. Holman?
Just a couple of thoughts, just comments generally about the budget process for the benefit of our new council members. Obviously, this is an annual process, and it is preceded by the capital budget process, which is pursuant to the charter provided to City Council on August 15th, and then by November 15th, the operating budget is provided. This is the first of 3 readings. There will be, there's at least 2 scheduled and a third, if we need it, work sessions. Those work sessions will start next Monday, the 2nd, and we have another one scheduled for Thursday, the 5th, and then we have one for the 12th if necessary. We then have the 3rd and final reading of the budget on the 19th of this month, and that's generally the year-end meeting where City Council will consider and take action on the budget, and generally there's a supplemental appropriation that we'll talk about at some point later. As part of that, the management pay plan, there's a lot of year-end legislation that comes before City Council, most of which is coming before you now in the form of first readings. The ordinance before you tonight is really not just the general fund, but includes all funds. And if you take a look at the 3rd page of that, actually the 4th page of that ordinance, which are actually the 5th page, you're taking a look at all funds, which is a $113 million appropriation. So that's the sum of all the different funds that the city has custody of, including the general fund. We will be reviewing the budget in greater detail with the department directors starting next Monday. We've kind of split them between some of the operating departments, and the safety departments will be on Monday. The balance will be on Thursday, and those work sessions are really an opportunity for City Council to hear from the department directors, to ask questions. We will be providing you information in advance so that hopefully you're prepared to ask questions. We have made some changes actually from the budget format in the past. It was more of a programmatic budget, which we're trying to incorporate in some way into this budget, and I'm going to have Alicia Ballone, our budget analyst, just talk about that briefly. If she, yes, come up. This is Alicia Ballone. She's our management and budget analyst. She was hired earlier this year, fills a position that had been vacant for a number of years, and actually has provided a real needed capacity in our office to put together the not just the operating budget, but the capital budget as well. So, Alicia, you can talk about that and maybe the citizen budget process, which is something Councilwoman Keller had asked us to look into last year.
Sure.
So, if you could just pull the mic forward there. Thanks.
So what you will be getting as a supplemental, some supplemental information is very similar to the programmatic. The only piece that will be missing is the actual allocation of cost by program. This was kind of really time consuming for staff to complete that part. It was more of a best guess and only done once a year. So they kind of made the decision that until we can load this into our new software and it's done automatically with more accuracy, that they want to put that on hold and bring it back. So we really want this to be a valuable tool that they use throughout the year. But we will provide you with all of the services, a list of their grades, how they're doing, all of that in the supplemental packet. Any
I know that was
questions?
something Councilman Hellinger had asked me about, and so that'll be helpful, I think.
Right, and there will still be those metrics that give you an idea of where they were versus last year. The only piece that will be missing is the cost. And then as far as citizen budget goes, we do have a tentative list of questions that we're considering asking that we will be reviewing with you. Our plan for now is that once this budget is adopted, we would use it as an educational tool for the public to share with them kind of where we were, see if they agree with our choices. You typically leave the window open for them to answer questions for anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. So by the time we got this ball rolling, it would have been really hasty to try to get it in this year before budget started. So we will move forward with that in January. And then hopefully we can have a finalized report for you on that if you guys have a spring retreat sometime in the second quarter.
So I know that was something that actually Mayor Riggle and Councilwoman Keller had seen at a conference, National League of Cities conference, and we've hopefully that's a citizen engagement tool. We'll provide feedback from our public about spending priorities and provide council with more information. it'll be probably more useful as for the successive budget, but will be helpful for this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And then the other thing, just to mention quickly, Finance Director Stelzer will be making his presentation on 12/9, December 9th, in terms of kind of his overview, covering all the various funds and the other highlights that Dean will, probably one of his final reports to council on the city's finances before he retires. So that'll be done as part of the December 9th meeting. And later this evening, you'll hear from Clerk DeNovo regarding her. She's here regarding her budget, and then Judge Hemmeter, I believe, will be here
December 9th.
December 9th. So that's what's kind of on the docket, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do know we have a public hearing, so I don't know if there's
Any questions from council? Chris, I know with your situation, you probably won't make it, is that correct?
I will not be here Thursday.
Okay, Monday, do you think? And I
This Monday I
understand.
plan on it, yes.
Okay.
Surgery's until Tuesday, so
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be here Thursday though.
Right, we fully understand. If you have any questions, if you go through beforehand, just send them to us and we'll get them answered for you. Okay, we'll open this up to the public. Is there anyone here that would like to come forward at this time? This is a public hearing. We'll close that public hearing. Thank you. We'll move on to item 12. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 19-63, an ordinance accepting the annexation of 43.847 plus or minus acres of land more or less. Description and map are attached hereto as Exhibits A and B for the annexation known as the Evans Farm, Delaware LLC annexation by Andrew Wecker, agent for the petitioners.
I think I can take this one. Madam,
Yeah, I was hoping you would.
Madam Mayor, members of council, the applicant and the city have been working through some issues with this annexation. Just to give you background and for the interest of anyone listening, the area which is being annexed is part of our town that when you annex in, we require to join our new community authority, the South New Community Authority. That was one of the conditions recommended for this piece of property. However, the applicant already put this piece of property in their own new community authority for Evans Farm with other parcels that aren't joining in the city. So they indicated they couldn't be in two new community authorities at once. Staff has presented them with some alternative ways to make a similar, comparable financial contribution to achieve the purposes of joining the new community authority without actually joining. And they are working through on their own internal team what might work best. So they have requested that we continue this to a date certain. That date certain will be January 13th of next year. You will notice in your packet that we relooked at the calculations, and we have, I believe, until March 9th, is that the right date?
That would be correct.
March 9th to approve or disapprove the annexation, so that's well within that time frame, but it gives them more time to figure out which way they want to go to meet this obligation. So rather than just continue to put it on the agenda every week and not do anything, we might as well just table for date certain, and then automatically comes back and gets placed on our agenda.
Will you keep us informed though when they do decide before, if it's before January, just so it's?
Absolutely, we will. We can continue to keep you updated. Also, if we are able to get something resolved before January and there's a meeting, we could tell council, and we could always make a motion to move it off the table earlier. I do think that date which they propose is a pretty good one, just because we're going to be consumed with the budget for most of December. So I don't know how much extra room we'll have on the budget, but if we do come to an agreement, we certainly can get it on earlier.
Okay.
We need a motion?
Yes, to make this happen, we would need a motion to table till January 13th of next year.
Well, first of all, are there any questions for Darren on this? Does everybody understand it? Okay.
I'll move to table ordinance number 1963 until January 13th of 2020. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. And then we'll do 13 and 14, if you'll read those both on the record, please.
Ordinance number 19-65, an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan request by TNR Properties for the enclave at the ravines at Olentangy containing 87 single-family attached units on approximately 14.906 acres on property zoned R6 PMU, multifamily residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on the north side of Curve Road and west of Rochdale Run. An ordinance number 19-66, an ordinance approving a preliminary subdivision plat request by TNR Properties for the enclave at the ravines of Olentangy containing 87 single-family attached units on approximately 14.906 acres on property zoned R6 PMU, multifamily residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on the north side of Curve Road and west of Rochdale Run.
Thank you. Mr. Eflin?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this was presented at your last council meeting, and I know you had some discussion about it. It's coming back before you with an updated fact sheet and updated ordinances to include the conversation and direction that you provided staff. I'm really happy to answer any questions that you might have. The thing I would say is that this development started well, it was last rezoned in 2004. It started, I think, before that. And it has been developing with Fisher Homes, single-family development. Really is a mixed-use development out there that included single-family homes, some duplexes, a condominium piece, which is what's in front of you tonight with your preliminary plan and preliminary plat. And then originally a senior housing component, which has been dropped from the plan, and I think 3 more lots have been added of single family. That would come forward with the next phase of the single family development. But for this is sub-area 3 of that original plan that included up to 90 condominium units. Obviously that was some time ago in development in the marketplace. And so what's coming forward is identical, really, to the enclave at Adelaide on Houck Road, which has been a pretty successful development so far in terms of attached single-family units, technically on their own lot. This facilitates sale of property and that sort of thing. But a few less units, I guess, overall than what the zoning would provide for today. So this portion of the process is the preliminary plan and plat. At the time of the overall preliminary plan, there was no specific preliminary plan for this sub-area, and so that's what this is. And a preliminary plat for the individual lots of record. What would happen should you approve this is that it would move forward to a final plan, a final plat would come forward, and we would work through a number of these conditions that you see in your ordinance, as well as anything else that may come up with respect to the discussions. Your staff and your planning commission do recommend approval of these items. For us, these are fairly perfunctory, and we think that the combination of the architecture of the location that we're talking about here makes a lot of sense for these kinds of units within our marketplace as well. So we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. I know Bill might want to provide a little bit of an update on there were some questions about the landfill. No, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Bill, but you might.
No, that's fine. Madam Mayor, member of the council, in the fact sheet, Dave did a really good job including my research and comments regarding that. I mistakenly said at the last meeting that this section was not included in the required notification zone. That's section 1 that is built is not required to have any such notifications on the deeds. About half of these lots, maybe a little less than half these lots on this section will be within the 1,000-foot offset from the waste edge of waste burial. So there's just a requirement per the EPA that the property owners be notified of the presence of a landfill within 1,000 feet of their property. And I believe the developers, we've already had those discussions and has agreed to continue to follow everything within the monitoring requirements that have already been agreed upon. I can answer any additional questions regarding the presence of the landfill, if there are any.
How would they be notified? I guess is my
The requirements for it to be a note within the deed. of the presence of a
On the deed
landfill.
itself That's recorded,
That's correct.
okay.
Would there be, with regards to the possibility of needing the trench, that in the notes there it said something about a EPA meeting in the future, next month, I believe it was?
Correct. We're meeting with the EPA as a follow-up to the original explosive gas monitoring plan. We thought it was a good idea because now we've triggered the part of the plan that requires both monitoring and notification and deeds. So in reviewing the explosive gas monitoring plan, it says that those types of things would be reason to get back and make sure, review the data to date and talk about future plans, notification process, if anything was to be triggered through monitoring. Our monitoring for gas has been going on for years out there in our own gas monitoring. We've added additional monitoring wells, and though the requirement isn't to start monitoring for gas until a year after the first habitable structure is built, the developer and the city together have gone and actually already started that process early this year. So we're actually accelerated some of the things in the requirements, no reason not to do it, and the developer's been good working with the city on that.
So, but the trench
Yes,
is
trench
not
was-
an existing thing, and who would be
Correct.
responsible for that, and is that clear cut at this point in time?
It's not. Back in 2006, there was discussion of a trench. Once the consent decree and the project went through the courts, there was not a requirement to construct a trench. And one of the things we want to talk about with the EPA is, should there be some need for a gas trench or gas cutoff trench at some point in the future? Where would that trench be constructed? What would be the requirements? Right now, there's not in the gas monitoring plan a requirement to build a trench. That was noted back in 2006, the possibility of that, but it wasn't continued through the discussions in the consent decree. So at this point, there is no requirement for a trench. Not that that couldn't be a potential mitigation measure at some point in the future, should there be a positive explosive gas reading. I will say too that typically the explosive gas peaks somewhere around year 7, 8, 9 after a landfill's closed, and we're coming up on 20 years of this landfill being closed. So we haven't had explosive gas issues to date in our reporting. So, but doesn't mean we don't want to just be good stewards and meet with the EPA and discuss the facts to date and see how we're doing with our monitoring and talk about just these issues. Should at some point in the future, and the explosive gas plan does say if at some point there are positive readings for explosive gas, these are the steps you go through. And so we want to understand today, well, what are those possible mitigation measures in the future, just for our own knowledge.
So the meeting then on the 9th with the EPA, is that kind of a green flag, red flag thing? I guess my concern with this is, knowing that we have a meeting within a couple weeks with the EPA, where it sounds like we don't even know what our liability is prior to going there. To me, it just seems like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, and that at least maybe wait until after that meeting to determine if there's an issue. And if there isn't, okay, well then, there isn't.
Well,
But if there is, I would hate to go ahead and make the city more liable at this point for something that is a couple weeks out.
It'd be helpful if I just really clarify. We don't have an issue in the explosive gas
Right.
monitoring plan now to say we even need to meet with the EPA. There's been no measurable need and that we've passed any of the requirements that would say you've got an explosive gas migration issue on this site or anywhere around the landfill. So we're not meeting with the EPA because we're trying to decide what to do next. We're meeting to say if there is a discussion of a trench at some point in the past that might be needed at some point in the future, unrelated to this development. It could be on a different part of the landfill. If that were to happen, then what would that trench look like, and where should the trench be installed? But we don't have we don't have cause right now to even alert the EPA saying, hey, there's a reason to build a trench. So it'd be purely speculative in the future. We're just trying to see if this ever did come up, what would that be? Because the comment was made back in 2006. It wasn't continued through the consent decree, but we're still interested in what, if some point in the future there was an issue, is that a appropriate measure that we could take? And, but there's not reason to think today that there is concern. And that's based on the reports that we've been getting and approved through EPA.
Bill, have there been any positive readings since we've been doing this monitoring?
There was a methane reading in a very north point, minor reading, but then it disappeared. And sometimes we expect that. And again, I'm not an environmental scientist, but the way it's described to us is new wells can have these false readings. And it could be migration from methane from a wetland nearby. The concern is when you continue to have an increasing readings in these points. We've subsequently monitored again, and there's been no increase in that reading. The reading's back to what we consider normal levels in all monitoring points across the landfill.
So is there anything that we are required to do now that's not being done?
No, we've met all the requirements of the monitoring plan, and so has the developer of this particular project.
And if we did at some point in the future get positive readings, what would be the remediation for that? Would that be what the trench would be for, or would there be additional measures?
Not necessarily. The plan calls out what would happen. We'd make certain notifications, then we'd meet with the EPA. Would go to probably monthly readings or more frequent readings, get better data, and then meet with the EPA and discuss, well, what type of mitigation should we apply to the landfill. And my understanding is there's many different ways, if you do have positive readings, to mitigate the landfill. Some of it's positive ventilation. If you've ever seen a landfill, those stacks with little spinning fans on top, that's one of the measures just to release methane gas. The trench is a way that may have been used in some places, and there's other measures. So it really depends upon the exact nature of the data, the frequency, the levels, and then EPA would guide us in terms of what would be the mitigation.
Bill, I don't want to put you on the spot, but this might be helpful. Aren't there also restrictions on building in certain areas and things you can do with basements and things that also kind of are preventative measures, like in certain buffer zones and stuff around the landfill?
Right. We haven't, in all the documentation we have, there's nothing that we find that prohibits basements. We know that the explosive gas monitoring plan was prepared with the original development proposal, and the structures to be built within the 1,000-foot did not have basements, and that's noted within this report. It doesn't say that basements can't be constructed. It just says that the particular development at the time didn't include basements. And the developer's here, and there's additional properties unrelated to this development that potentially could have basements, structures, but I think they're on hold on that right now at their own choice. So we're really focusing on this particular section without basements.
So are you saying that, if I understand correctly, the meeting that you're going to have with the EPA is basically a meeting of extraordinary prudence for the staff?
Absolutely.
And assuming we were to take this to 3 readings, you would have this meeting with the EPA before that meeting? Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll have the meeting on the 9th, so that would be before the next meeting, and that's a good way to characterize the purpose of the meeting. I was not involved in preparation of this document back in 2006, so my knowledge is limited other than researching the history of it. So it's just prudent upon us to meet with them and go through the document and just update where we are with the project and make sure we fully understand what EPA's expectations are. More so for our own landfill than not really just development, but we are operating and maintaining a landfill. So it is prudent upon ourselves to make sure that we're fully versed in what the EPA requirements are.
And perhaps Director Elflin can chime in. Suppose we take this to a 3rd reading at this stage in the game. We have this extraordinarily prudent meeting with the EPA. Is there any indication that although you approve this development or recommend it, that there'd be some shock to the supply of housing if we wait an additional 2 weeks?
No, I don't think there'd be a shock to the supply. The one thing I would say is that this is preliminary plan and plat, and so you will get another bite at the apple, so to speak, with final plans and plats that the developer really can't begin preparing until,
Okay.
obviously, he knows that the preliminary has been approved at this point. So that's why, from our perspective, given the background that Bill gave you, it's really more that this meeting's just happening proximate in time to this discussion than anything. But I don't think it would change anything, based on Bill's recommendation to this section of the plan either. I would recommend, if you're thinking about a third reading, typically what we've said is for preliminary plans and plats that are non-controversial, you can determine whether this is or not. There's not been any controversy going through the process today. That typically we would look to do 2 readings, always at your pleasure as to what you might want to do, but you probably would want to inquire from the developer who is here tonight too, what sort of impact that might be on his schedule.
Now, Bill, I understand this trench would go around there only if we needed it. But they're gonna be disturbing a lot of dirt around there in all this building, and I realize there's no basements. But I just wonder if that will have any effect, because everything's gonna change where the water goes because of the pavement and everything else. I'm not saying it will, just some things to bring up when you meet with this gentleman, I don't know. That stuff just keeps going in my mind. I know asbestos is fine as long as you don't touch it, just don't touch it. I just keep thinking about, we don't know what this will happen when we start moving it. Because we've never come across this before here in the city, don't believe. So,
No, we haven't, and, again, on the landfill, we have 16 some water quality wells
Right.
and multiple gas monitoring wells on this. It's extraordinarily protected piece of property with the amount of monitoring going on. Now, we're talking about another piece of property that's not on the landfill, that all those other things are in place to protect the residents. There's no prohibition against any type of earth disturbing activities or construction on this particular landfill, even at the proximity that we're talking about. So those measures are in place if in some chance there is some gas migration, we'd be able to capture that. In terms of what the trench would look like or could look like, even back in 2006, that was undefined. It was, we should meet with the EPA at some time, should that be required, to determine where that might go, what it might look like. And we don't have any definition. And I could probably say even after our meeting in December with them, we probably won't know because there's not a requirement for such trench. So what I can do is report back what we discussed during the meeting. I really don't think, I'm not sure what bearing it will have on this particular preliminary plat.
and then my other concern is the park that's been donated to the city to program this park. Do we want our kids playing there? I don't know,
Yeah, again, there's no
I know.
landfill in that
Mhm.
area, and again, it's just as protected as the residents are against any possible contamination. What I did try to look at, why is there a 1,000-foot limit? And if you go back to 1976, one of the siting rules established that within 1,000 feet, they don't want new development that's drilling wells and getting their supply from the ground. Clearly, we are in a municipal water supply situation that not impactful, that statement, but nevertheless, I was trying to identify what's the significance of 1,000 feet, because it shows up in several different EPA guidances regarding landfills, and usually it's, the best I could say is, speculate, is that's the comfort zone EPA has, that, hey, we want to look out that far and protect anyone in that area, and just do a lot of monitoring against water quality and against explosive gas migration in that bubble. That's not to say that there's a high probability that you're gonna have any problem in it. That's just the limit that ODOT or EPA has established to monitor.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a question on a different note. The streets in here are private streets.
That's correct.
So I was curious if we had any update on the issue that I forwarded on November 17th from a resident in the enclave at Adelaide, complaining about a whole bunch of different issues regarding the street and large potholes and various things on Rachel Lane there.
I think both Dave and Bill are aware of that. Bill, I think you had
Yeah.
mentioned something to me this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I met with staff, and the way on a private development with private streets and private infrastructure, we manage it is when there's a final occupancy request for a building, we'll go and do inspection, create a punch-out list of items we believe could be repaired. Unlike public roads and public infrastructure, we don't have maintenance bonds or leverage to say these things have to be fixed because they're not ours. Frankly, it's an issue between the property developer, the home builder, the homeowners association, and again, I think our applicants are here tonight who also are involved in that, could maybe provide update on that. But we would capture those in a final inspection and make note that these are items that should be reviewed and addressed. And regarding curb and roads and grading issues, I believe all those are being captured in these inspections and being relayed to the developers' representatives.
Are these developments part of our sidewalks and our Safe Walks program then?
They're not public right-of-ways, so they're not included in our requirements either, under Ohio Revised Code.
Okay. So we basically have no recourse then except for to ask the developer to address these issues?
That's very true on, other than we point them out, and most times developers work with us, they want to do a good job for the residents and they make repairs. And it's the same as any multifamily development where we don't have public right-of-way, that we do have limited recourse as to what we can and can't enforce.
And I would say, Councilwoman Keller, that there were a number of issues. We did go out and take a preliminary look at them, at least from our department's perspective. And there were a couple of issues there, but they look like they were also perhaps a process of being addressed. It's an active construction site. Obviously, we're not finished doing construction there. But there are things like the internal sidewalk network and the landscaping were obviously part of your approval processes that we believe we could enforce. If it was year 10 from now, we could enforce on it would be the homeowners association at that point, more than likely that those items would have to be addressed. So we're still going through our portion of that process, but we're cognizant, as Bill says, is active construction site, and that there may be a section of sidewalk that needs to be replaced, and there may be a pothole in the road, and there's certainly a couple of trees on the mound that didn't make it that you're not going to plant this time of year, but you would plant in the springtime, so those sorts of things.
Okay. I'll just, I think I shared the email with council, but in this email, the person who lives on Rachel Lane wants us to consider this a red flag for any consideration of approval for future developments because they feel like the conditions are not being, up to their standard in the enclave. So just getting that on the record.
I'll just be candid too. The conditions out there are not dissimilar to what we see in many multifamily projects under construction. There's a lot of contractors in there doing a lot of things for up to 2 years, and sometimes it just looks like a mess. But staff does a good job at capturing these things over time. There's nothing, I don't think, specific to Enclave that we haven't seen in a number of multifamily developments in the past.
I would agree with that.
Do we have a date when things could be expected to be cleaned up? I'm just not sure how I'm supposed to respond except for, sorry, it's under construction.
Yeah, we haven't finished our process yet to be able to provide you an answer, at least
Okay.
from items that are under our purview. I don't think Bill's staff has had an opportunity to do that yet either, but that's definitely on our agenda to get you an answer so you can answer your constituent.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Bill or Dave at this time? Would the applicant like to come forward? Good evening. If you'll state your name and address for the record, please.
RJ Sabatino with TNR Properties, 2705 Donna Drive. So I'd just like to say thank you for having us again. I think that Bill and Dave both did a very good job answering a lot of your questions, so I appreciate that. Again, this development is very similar to what you saw at Enclave at Adelaide, which has been very successful. I think the last home, or the first home was sold by Ryan in October of last year, up to 90 right now, doing very well. And as far as this development goes, we've complied and exceeded all of the EPA's requirements. So we would kindly ask that you follow your recommendation of voting tonight, if you would. And I think that's it. I can answer any questions you have.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the wish of council?
From my perspective, the question before us is there a reason to delay this beyond the second reading of preliminary plan? I know we all disagree about that, but I'll just call the question. I don't see that there is based on what I heard tonight. So I'm going to recommend that we suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on, what are we at, ordinance 19-65.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
No.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
No.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yeah, super.
Mean super?
Right.
5 for suspend the rules.
So what, we just explained that real quickly, that charter requires.
So just to give a little primer, because we haven't had orientation yet, our charter requires that all pieces of legislation go 3 readings. However, City Council is able to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings, but to do so, our charter says that's a supermajority, or in essence, 5 instead of the normal 4. So if to suspend the rules, we need to have 5, but then to actually vote on the underlying legislation, we fall back down to the 4 number.
So in that case,
Mayor Riggle, did you want to enter your vote
We've already got 3 no's.
for the record? Okay.
So we'll go to another reading.
And that'll be the 3rd reading, so we won't need to suspend the rules next time, and it'll just get voted on.
so then we move on.
Yep. What'd you say?
Item 15.
Yeah, we're gonna go on to item 15, now you're doing 14. Okay, item 15 is an 8 o'clock public hearing, we're a little bit late for second reading of ordinance number 1967. Elaine, if you'll please read the rest of this into the record.
Okay. And ordinance number 1968?
Yes.
Ordinance number 19-67, an ordinance approving a development text amendment for Delaware Development Plan Ltd. for Coghlan's Crossing to sub-areas 2, 5, and 6 on approximately 80 acres located east of US 23, west of Stratford Road, north of Meeker Way, and south of Elliott Estates subdivision and zoned A1 PMU, agricultural district with a planned mixed-use overlay district. And ordinance number 19-68, an ordinance approving an amended preliminary development plan for Delaware Development Plan Ltd. for Coghlan's Crossing to sub-areas 2, 5, and 6 on approximately 80 acres located east of US 23, west of Stratford Road, north of Meeker Way, and south of Elliott Estates subdivision and zoned A1 PMU, agricultural district with a planned mixed-use overlay district.
Thank you. Mr. Eflin?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is an amended development text and an amended preliminary development plan for Coghlan's Crossing for 3 of the sub-areas. I will do a presentation for you tonight. I am not going to go into a tremendous amount of historical detail. I think we provided a lot of that in your packet, including graphically, so you could see a lot of the differences. I know we do have 2 new council members, but I also know the developer has a presentation to make as well that I think will help you visually orient yourself and really see what's going on, and then we're happy to answer any questions, of course, you might have. So let's jump into it. The site has been conceived as an 80-acre mixed-use development between Stratford Road and US 23 north of Meeker Way. The zoning is planned mixed-use overlay. We also amended our comprehensive plan to designate this area as mixed use. Again, that's what the overall plan has been for this site from the very beginning. And the sub-areas that we're talking about tonight are shown on this. North is to the top of the screen. The sub-areas are 2, 5, and 6. 5 and 6 were really discussed in concept actually over a year ago with the Planning Commission and some of those changes. And then I think the sub-area we spent more time talking about than the other two really has been sub-area 2, where there have been some additional changes. So now north is to the right side of your screen. US 23 is on the top of your screen, and Stratford Road's on the bottom, Meeker Way on the left side of your screen. This is a composite revised preliminary plan. Your Planning Commission did hear this in August and asked for staff and the applicant to look at several items and provide some additional graphics to help orient and explain what the proposed revisions are. This is one of those items to try to put the sub areas all back together again in a revised format. And so what you see here is a preliminary plan revision for this building. This is what's being constructed now with the car wash on the site, just to orient you. The change to this sub area is really this was originally conceived as the detention retention area, which has been moved to this part of the site for a lot of technical engineering reasons. That's a part of the site that needs to have the detention retention. And it allows an opportunity. This was to be a development site, and that really flip-flops where the detention would be and where a development site would be. And then sub-area 2 was broken down, or is broken down into 2 phases, 2A and 2B down here. And we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. I've just outlined these again for you. These are the sub-areas. So 1, 3, and 4, those are what are on the preliminary plan and text right now, and showing some major buildings, conceivably a grocer, but a large box retailer here, more of 2 mixed-use structures in the middle of the site. Again, we're talking about sub-areas 2, 5, and 6 for these changes. So sub-area 5 is really what I just described to you. These portions of sub-area 5 remain the way they are conceived today. And in sub-area 6, we're really talking about this portion of it. We still don't know, and preliminary plans would have to come forward for this portion of the sub-area. But this is the portion that we're talking about today as well. And that would include in sub-area 6 approximately a 17,600 square foot building with parking, landscaping in accordance with the text. The text is very detailed in terms of every sub-area, as well as the design requirements, which are significant for this development, and tie it all together. So the applicant has provided a rendering even at this preliminary stage, which is not necessarily required, but I think it helps to show the quality, and it shows the vision of what this building would be. Again, it fits with clearly fits with the development text, a kind of the stone end barn look. Yes, this is a new building with retail and perhaps dining opportunities and that sort of thing, but it does fit that design motif, as I think it's pretty obvious from the renderings. A series of photographs or renderings like this were included within your packet, together with a key to give you a sense from the road and with the trees planted, some cars parked, that sort of thing as well. Again, just back to the sub areas, and I think probably spend most of our time and most of the questions, if not all the questions, were really related to sub area 2 and some of the changes that were requested by the applicant dating back to at least August and then coming forward again. And the applicant really has done a very good job of going out and again meeting with their future neighbors, their current neighbors, and getting their input, and also working with us as staff to address a number of items. They reintroduced a boulevard entry approach off Stratford Road. Frankly, most of our conversation with respect to these changes has not been the quality of the developer. It's Roman, Elliott & Hughes, and my inspectors will tell you, for example, that it really just doesn't get any better than that particular developer in terms of what they build. I think certainly the quality is there. So we spent most of our time and most of the public comment talking about really the existing traffic on Stratford Road, let alone what's proposed and what has already been approved, regardless of any of the changes here. So that's been most of it. But there have been some substantive changes coming out of the August proposal, and that's really reintroducing that boulevard approach so that you still have access, but it feels much more residential, and it also serves as you step to the west in the site to provide some traffic calming along that boulevard. First of all, just the boulevard, but then as you get back into the site and into those future sub areas whose plan hasn't changed at this point in time. So it allows access, but it doesn't necessarily invite access through the site. Bill can talk a little bit more about re-examining traffic and access issues. This was part of the reintroduction of that boulevard approach. One of the things that the developer did and then our own engineers did was they went back and they examined a series of different approaches to access to this site overall, really regardless of the use. They took into account the proposed use, but could it be right in, right out? Could it be split at different ends of the site, et cetera? And the conclusion was very clear that and it's included in your packet, that the proposed changes really have no effect on the overall traffic that would be coming to or from this site, and that it also reaffirmed that access point off Stratford Road is critically important to the overall approach to managing traffic to this mixed-use site. Again, Bill's a traffic expert, and if you have questions, he can go into that more detail. They reduced the number of units from the August proposal by 16, so it's a total of 178 units in sub-area 2. By our best abilities to calculate, sub-area 2 could accommodate today, under today's zoning text, about 150 units or so. Again, recall it was split into two sub-areas, A and B. The biggest change really along Stratford. There were 24 units proposed in that sub area. There are now, with these changes, down to 48 in 3 buildings as opposed to 24 in 24 buildings. And some they could be attached or detached under today's code. The proposal is to do 3 buildings. All 16 units that were removed along Stratford Road. The buildings were also shrunk in size. That was related to some of the comments that we heard, to open up some of the spaces between those buildings along Stratford Road. And each building was reduced 25 to 30 feet, so in total it's about 100 feet more of open space there as you go along Stratford that will have a lot of landscaping and other things in it. Those buildings are still 2 stories, still display the same quality that they have from the beginning. And then back behind that to the west would be 3-story buildings. So you can see we're sort of stepping up in intensity, but as we go to the west and towards 23, but still fulfilling the original intent of providing that layered buffering approach between the buildings and building heights, maintaining the quality, and then the landscaping that will go in as well. The pool and the clubhouse were reversed too. Before, the pool was really wasn't adjacent to, but it more addressed Stratford Road. Made more sense to use that clubhouse building to address Stratford Road and put the pool and that more active stuff to the west. We did verify the size and updated what's called the Stratford Commons Park. This is the main park area, kind of between these sub areas, and in fact, it's a little bigger than it is in the text in the plan today. It would be about 1.65 acres. We've eliminated one. This change will eliminate one access point to it as well, which really bisected the park and kind of interrupted the open space. So this allows for a little bit better and cohesive open space that can then be programmed as the Stratford Commons Park. Again, maintain the high quality building design. Enhanced, because the building shrunk a little bit, the landscaping around the perimeter of the buildings and wrapping around the corners was able to be enhanced again. and that'll pay dividends over time as the landscape it takes grows up, that sort of thing. And then we had the applicant produce a number of cross-sections, illustrations, comprehensive site plans. In fact, they have a 3D walk-through, fly-through, that I think will really orient you and help us as staff, really help Planning Commission get a visual orientation on what's being proposed here. So this is the site plan with those elements I just described. Again, north is to the right of the screen. Stratford Road is on the bottom of the screen. And this, again, was included in your packet. But I think this layered approach is really still very much in keeping with the original approvals. They also, I just wanted to include this, I know it was in your packet, but a section illustration to show you, granted with trees at some level of maturity here. This isn't at planting, obviously. But it shows you the two-story building, and it shows you really graphically the distance from Stratford Road all the way back across where some tree lawn space is going to be, a bike path, and then where some stormwater management would be, and then back to the buildings of just the two-story. The three-story would be sort of off this page to the left then from this point. Now, this is what we would traditionally call a sightline study too for the new council members. The quality, again, this was contained in your packet, is still there. These are very articulated buildings. That means that they sort of move like this in and out. It breaks up what would otherwise be an expanse of wall on the building and makes the building really, it breaks down the scale and the mass and the volume and the size, the feel of the building. Now, the roofs are highly pitched with dormers and other design details that break up that roof of the building. And again, traditionally having a more pitched roof is indicative of, in Central Ohio, of some additional quality with respect to the development as well. So those are the two-story buildings. These are the three-story buildings, and we certainly talk about those. And then there are some garaged parking spaces, which present an opportunity to have some smaller, more efficiency, although they are one-bedroom unit types above them. There are only 10 of these units across the site, 5 of these buildings. But next to the two-story buildings, and then if you can envision a layered three-story building behind that, the architecture really helps that layered approach that I'm describing and provides, we really don't have some higher end efficiency units within the city. Again, these are one-bedroom units, but they are smaller one-bedroom units, and we can certainly talk about that. It is a mixed-use development, so we can vary that within the mixture of the uses. If you see fit, you can. Again, the clubhouse maintains the level of quality. So I'm happy to stop there and answer any questions that you might have at this point in time. I do think it would be instructive to see the applicant's presentation, and as I did at Planning Commission, Sean Hughes was kind enough to attend our Planning Commission and talk a little bit about the site overall and what he sees from an economic development perspective with respect to this site, and particularly what we're seeing in sub-area 2. And so I just open the floor to you if you care to make any comments, Sean, with respect to the staff report and those elements.
All right. Good evening, members of council. Thank you, Dave. I think to touch base on what I spoke about at Planning Commission, what I see this project as being is a much needed mixed-use development. We don't have currently a true newer mixed-use product in the city of Delaware. I characterize the downtown as being a mixed-use development, but obviously it's 100+ years old. So not everybody, obviously as soon as we get apartments renovated down here, they are taken. There's waiting lists on the apartments as they're renovated down here, but not everybody wants to live in a 100-year-old apartment. So what this gives us is another product in the city that's comparable, but obviously modern, that allows us to continue to attract young professionals, especially, I believe, to work in these white-collar jobs that we're going to continue to secure in the community. It also creates an environment where we will have a higher quality office product. Again, We have offices being renovated in downtown. Those are being filled as soon as we can renovate them, but not everybody wants to have their office in a 100-year-old product. So again, this gives us a much more modern, closer to an A-level product on the office side, but also in a walkable format that allows, just like downtown, somebody to live in one of these nice apartments, walk downstairs, go to their office, work, and all hours of the day. As I'm discovering, being in Cohatch, people work all the time. I see people in there at 2 o'clock in the morning. Don't ask me what I'm doing there at 2 o'clock in the morning. But I see people there. They can walk down to the restaurant, the pub on the corner. Again, very similar to downtown, except new and modern. So I just think that this is something that will continue to expand the attractiveness of our community and is much needed here. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
I have one. I'll grant that it's very new. A lot of it hasn't been built yet, but has there been a lot of interest from different groups in renting some of these spaces on the front end of this at all?
I think there's a lot of interest from the retail commercial side, even the office side. The component that you need to start before any of that really truly starts is the housing side, though. Retail follows rooftops, so we have to get the apartments and the houses in, and then I think then you'll see the offices. I think Connie's planning on having some of the offices on second floors above retail, and then there was a potential 43,000 square foot office building on the 23 side that could be built as well. But yes, there's already interest in those types of product, but I think the housing comes first so people can have a place to live and then utilize the rest.
And Councilman Farrell, I think one of the things we've been talking about in our comprehensive plan process with respect to mixed use, with respect to maybe infrastructure and fiscal sustainability of the community overall is some of these sites, and we do have some commercial development shopping malls in the community that actually are pretty full. Sometimes we hear about how people feel they're not full, but they're pretty full. Sean can tell you some of them are actually full. But one of the things that can help those sites overall is to intensify the uses a little bit more than the separation of uses that we had before. So it was all just retail environments. Changed a lot with Amazon. I think probably going to change more yet. And so to the extent that there can be some residential development within these prior single-use retail developments, that can be beneficial. This has the benefit of being planned from the start. There will be some change. Obviously, it's just starting with a car wash at this point. There are good regional examples of this, from the Worthington Mall to what's happening at the Grayson Shopping Center to Bridgemark as an example of sort of a big, massive version of this in Dublin. That's just Central Ohio, and it's really happening statewide and nationally.
Retail's happening in a smaller format now as well. I mean, the big boxes of yesteryear, what you would have seen as an 90,000 square foot box are now 30,000 square foot. In fact, a lot of the new Targets and whatnot that you're seeing going on across the country, and that's one of the few traditional department discount stores that's still being built, are 30,000 square foot units. So 30,000 square foot's more along the lines of a very small Kroger, if you want to put it in context. So, you know, I think what this format gives you is it gives the opportunity for a lot of what you see again downtown, but a little bit more on the franchise side, where you see smaller boutique stores, but again, they're part of another larger organization, unlike downtown where you see the mom and pop stores that are locating down here, and that's a good thing. It's a good mixture to have that. Two different products.
Just want to point out, that was our IT person, none of us. Sorry, Sean. Just couldn't resist.
I thought that was theme music.
I know. Music everybody. Well, I think council and the public that's here could really benefit from the applicant's really done a great job. And they had for Councilman Hoffman, Councilman Farrell's benefit, they had done a 3D fly through at the original zoning as well. This is updated to include the new plan. I think it really orients you to the perspectives here as well, so you may benefit from. I think they got it queued up. They have to run this because I think it would might explode our computer if we put all that on.
Good evening. Will you give us your name and address? please?
Sure, Connie Klima, P.O. Box 991, Pataskla, Ohio. I'm very excited about this development and working a lot with the city, all of the departments. Dave and Lance and everyone have been great, of course. Where we are now is finally where we've wanted to be for a long time. Infrastructure in, 3 signaled access points on 23. We have a lot of excitement, and as Dave said, and also Sean said, what we found in the last 3 years or so as we've been marketing this is that what really makes a mixed use work is having it mixed use, meaning you have to have residences there. So the fact that Romanelli and Hughes literally agreed that they wanted to build here was a Christmas present to me about last summer. So I'm happy to say that the top qualities here, we've worked with the neighbors, we met with them numerous times in their homes, at the Historical Society, and also here. And they came out at the last Planning Commission meeting, some of them, and offered their support and some of their suggestions. So what I'm going to show you is actually a little better view than what we had the last time, but we're going to start on Meeker Way, and you can see how it will look approaching the development. So if you were at Meeker Way in Coglin's, basically where you would go north, and then we're going to start heading east. And you'll see now that because we've taken away the development side down here and have made it a retention area, it's almost all green. And all of this, of course, is open space and
Will you pull your microphone so
Sure.
that you, I don't care if you move, just move the microphone with you.
Yeah, I get excited and
I
I
know
move
you
all
do,
over. Yeah.
but I want them to hear you.
Okay. So anyway, we come down to Stratford. As you see, we've extended the bike trail. We're in the process of getting the retention areas done. And as Dave showed, there are no driveways on Stratford Road. This is all bike trail and green space and front yards, which makes it a lovely area along Stratford. You'll see the clubhouse there, the first building that you would see, the end of it there, and you'll start to see the residential structures as they sit back. Garage entries and parking is all in the rear, so that will not be going on along Stratford Road. We'll head north. The only access on Stratford Road into this is the boulevard entrance. The boulevard entrance takes us into the center of the development, where we will also then at that point meet our mixed-use commercial areas. But this is strictly the residential area. We'll be making the turn left into this. I noted at the Planning Commission we're going down the wrong side of the street, but we're going to do that again. As you see, we go into the residence. So if you live here, you come home, you can park. You have lovely bike trail out along Stratford. You can walk, not drive, to the park. And this really starts to show the length and really how wonderful this park is. It's not just a strip of land that we thought, oh great, it's going to be green space. This is active, usable park area that's going to be there for not only our residents, but other residents that want to come here, park perhaps at the retail areas and walk here, picnic here, play football here, frisbee, bring your dogs, that type of thing. You start to see the length of this. I think it's fantastic. We're going to go up here to a sky view so you can see out to the east and have more of an idea of the residential area itself and the park. The next view is going to be, we're going to start on at the north part of 23, as if you were heading south and going to go into the development at Hawthorne. Now we're traveling south on 23. You see the blue sky to the left, and then you see the retail, mixed-use, office retail space, restaurants, whatever we can get there on the left-hand side, and then you'll be coming to the light on 23 and able to turn into the development and go east into the development. You can see that our proposed building, as Dave also said, is more like a stone end barn. You'll see the the ends here. Now there's four-sided architecture. It's not like you're just seeing a side of a building, but you'll see that all four sides of this architecture is finished so that it's attractive from either 23 or Coghlan. This is actually driving north and looking at the rear of the property, or what could be the front of the property, depending on what you want to call it. If you feel like going to this development and coming in and grabbing a bite to eat or doing whatever, this shows you how you would be coming in. We'll have a drive-through on the end caps if needed, and then you could come around to the front on 23. This style of architecture is what we're going to hopefully be doing as we go south of Hawthorne and on down to Meeker Way. On the interior of the property, the big box area that was pointed out and the other area, we are hopeful now that it will become not a big box. We know that that probably will not happen, and what I'm really seeking out right now is literal more uses within that area of commercial and office spaces, so that it is more of an extension of a downtown and not a one large spot of one user. So anyway, the times are working with us. I think that might be a possibility, but that has nothing to do with what we're proposing tonight. So.
Questions for the applicant? Are you guys wowed?
I would have lived there.
I know, it's beautiful.
I would just like to say, first of all, I'm very impressed by your presentation. I think you did a really good job. I represent the third ward where you're going to be, and one thing that we said, we have people in the southern part of the ward who don't feel very connected to the city of Delaware. What's going to make folks sell me on how folks living down there are going to want to come up here toward Delaware, take a stop here at Coughlin's versus go down to Polaris? And what's going to make people who live over in Stratford Woods across the street want to walk their kids over there and hang out over there? Sell me on it.
Okay, I'll sell you on it. I think that whether you want to go downtown or to the extended downtown, it's part of Delaware. It's going to have people that retailers that want to be in Delaware, like you have downtown, and you're going to have people that want to live in Delaware living here. So first of all, we have the bike trail, which is a connection. And as that bike trail continues with other developments, that connection will be there. Before we started this, people that live on Stratford Road north going south could not even walk on Stratford Road. We're now going through a widening of Stratford Road, added the bike trail that goes clear down to Meeker Way and then turns the corner. So I think that connectivity, which was part of your master plan, I believe, is working. That bike trail turns on Stratford and heads west and goes all along the northern border of our property to US 23, meaning that people that live north of this project can also come over and get on that trail and not go all the way to Stratford. So also what's going to make people want to come here is what you also do downtown. You can come here on an evening and hopefully go get something to eat, maybe go have a picnic, or go do something with some friends at a nice restaurant or shop, and not have to get in your car and drive and get in your car and drive and get in your car and drive.
Yeah.
It's a one-stop shop.
Thanks.
So you're not planning on Stratford being
You have to wait, you have to come before the microphone, so I'll ask.
I'll go ahead and answer a question though. The only portion of Stratford that we are required to widen was because there's a curve there now. We have an area there that has to be widened to make it more safe, and we will be widening that area almost to the north area of our property, but not up to the Janes portion. So that portion is underway now that we have the bike trail in.
Okay. Are there questions from council?
This isn't necessarily a developer question, but as far as the bike trail goes, I know we have a lot of disconnected bike trails, so will this connect into the bike trail we have along 23? I don't know who I'm directing that at.
So the quick answer is this will be a portion of that connection that will eventually allow us to connect. We did take some easements and such in front of the Historical Society and Turkey Hill when those went in. There's what we call a hung sewer, I guess, across 23. If you go over the bridge and you see the big concrete structure right there, that could accommodate a bike trail on top of it, which could be really the start of a connection to the southeast, it's all the southeast portion of the city, maybe the far southeast portion of the community as well. There'll be gaps until you know, between there, but it fills a large section of gap that we have.
In the north, it would be up to the Hull Drive, hopefully being able to get folks over the Hull Drive bike path. And once you're on that, you can get into town, right?
Any other questions of the applicant?
Only one comment.
Mhm.
I think that you always do an amazing job of showing us exactly what this is going to look like, getting lots of public input. The only thing I wanna say is the tiniest of the apartments, 570,
Mhm.
and there's only 10 units.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that we don't end up with another developer coming in and building an entire complex of 570 units. I can see, with just 10 units, that may be filling a need for someone.
Mhm.
But I don't wanna set a new precedent
Mhm.
for those types of units in massive complexes. I don't think 10 units does any major
Yeah,
harm.
and what these really are a complement to the type of development. They're what we really call a carriage house, which you see a lot in towns, and you probably have, I don't know, but you may have them here in Delaware, where someone who literally had a carriage house where they would park underneath. Some of them down in downtown Columbus is where they used to actually keep their carts or whatever downstairs and then go upstairs and have their living unit. And these are, if you want to set a precedent here, I'll say it on the record, that these are basically complementary to the actual fact that we have some garages that would look better if you have a unit above and will work better. For instance, I would say a retired person, perhaps like me, if I ever retired and didn't want a large facility, I would be able to go there, park my car, have guest parking, but be able to go upstairs, have a second-story safe unit that's small, one bedroom, and complete with everything I need.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very, very much. We do have a public hearing set for this for November 25th. I know there's a lot of you out there that probably want to talk tonight. Huh? Oh, it is 25th, wasn't it? I'm all right. I'm all right. I want to go home. Can you tell? I'm hungry. Okay, I guess we're ready for public hearing then. Do you have the list, Elaine?
There were no sign-ins.
Okay.
And I checked last, so.
So if you would like to come forward on this, please raise your hand and I will call you forward. You what? You're done?
I'm done now.
Well, that's pretty easy. How about anybody else that's here? Do you want to come forward and ask any questions? Really?
Tell us what you think.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. That's pretty easy. What is the wish of council?
Well, given
No
the-
wishes?
No, given the amount of work that the developer's done and working with our planning department, given what our economic development director has said about this, I mean, I think this is a really positive, new type of development. Again, I don't see that delaying this by 2 more weeks.
Wait, I think she wants, did you have a question? I did. Then you have to come to the microphone. And you have to give us your name and address.
But it was his matter. I wasn't.
That's okay.
Mary Burke, 146 Hull Drive.
Thank you. What's your question?
The north section of the property, was it the north?
Yeah,
by
by
the
the bottom.
It must be close to the bike path or the walking path. I don't know exactly, but there was
Dave,
these
can you put your
units
map
all the
back
way
up?
up. There was, I think, like
That was on his
16
one.
16
Yeah.
units.
I got you.
And that was
Did you
the
do
end
it?
of the
Okay.
establishment. It just went up.
Yeah, additional units.
You want the overall?
Like in one.
Behind one, they had.
No, it was one.
So you're talking about in here?
Yes,
The
in
bike
there.
path turns it's actually built out there today and turns up this way and then comes, cuts this way down Pennyway, or down Hawthorne.
I think she's asking about, in one of the drawings, there was shown that there were potential units there.
Yes.
Those are just shown to show what could be there under what's currently zoned, but we're not proposing those right now. We have nothing going there right now.
So by the zoning today, this sub-area 1 is conceived as preserving the Jane's barn and the Jane's home. As of now, although the home could be, it's maybe a heavier lift, the home could be subject to things, but the barn would be preserved. And then the area, there's a small area behind there, I forget how many acres it is off the top of my head, Connie, but it's kind of defined by the stream corridor there. That could be residential in several different varieties by the zoning today. And then as you get farther to the west and past the stream, right here is a stream.
Right.
This is part of sub-area 6 that's more in keeping with these kinds of uses that are oriented towards US 23. The goal was to maintain the tree line that was there, and I think they've done that, and also enhance it by adding some additional trees that will grow over time.
Is there a road going to be coming in from Chevron? Is that something in the works?
So we've long preserved the ability for sort of a backage drive. Who knows where it would be, somewhere along, this is about Chevron's property line, that could connect and allow, there's lots of backage roads along US 23 to help traffic get from use to use, but then more safely to the lights that are put in. And so there's preservation that Chevron could, there could be an easement from there. Exactly where, it could be anywhere along their length. I think, probably up near 23, or they have sort of a backage aisle on their site. Either one of those locations probably makes the most sense sitting here today, but we don't know.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so again, stating what I've already said, I'm going to move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 19-67.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
So move for the approval of ordinance 1967.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries.
I will move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 19-68.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 19-68.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Good luck. Just don't take away our great downtown. Don't build it too nice, okay? Okay, let's move on to item 17, which is consideration of resolution number 19-51.
Resolution number 19-51, a resolution of no objection to the expansion of the Concord Scioto Community Authority, a new community authority under Chapter 349 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Mr. Shulman.
Madam Mayor, members of council, we've done this many times before. However, this is probably the first time for our new members. There are things called new community authorities, which are created as a way to generate revenue on a piece of property that goes to pay for the development. We have our own new community authorities, but also when we are the closest proximate city to another new community authority, they need to get approval from us to do it. This particular one, I think, has been before us at least 4 times since I've been here. They created the new community authority. We had no objection. And every time they want to expand the new community authority to add new property, as the proximate city, we need to approve. When we get these requests, we typically do an analysis to see if it has any impact on the city. I believe there's maybe been one occasion where we said, your new community authority actually does impact us, but generally they don't. And in this one, we have found that there's literally no impact on the city, so we routinely approve these without any big introspection or objection or discussion. However, if you have any questions, since this is new to you, I'd be happy to try to answer it. But I believe this is just like maybe the 4th or 5th expansion of this particular one. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
And we would recommend action this evening if council sees fit. That's what we've done in the past.
Any question for council? Okay, motions?
Move for the adoption of resolution 1951.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 18 is consideration of ordinance number 19-70. Will you please read this into the record?
Ordinance number 19-70, an ordinance amending the Delaware Municipal Court and Clerk of Court employee benefits and leave policies and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city. The emergency clause is required to enact the changes effective on December 25th, 2019. Therefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you.
Hello.
Bruce is timing me, so I'm going to go.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Cindy DeNovo, Clerk of the Delaware Municipal Court, 70 North Union Street.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot something.
This will not be counted against your time.
Is this just about the benefit package, or am I going to talk about my budget now too?
Probably the former, but it's up to city council. I mean,
Okay.
You're here.
they have your budget. Yeah, so. given the
Normally I make a
hour-
presentation, but if I don't need to make a presentation, I'll be happy not to. As far as the benefit change, I think I didn't request any changes. I believe Judge Hemeter did, and it included a part-time magistrate position. Time.
We did provide for council's benefit just a one-page summary. There were 2 pay grades that were slightly changed,
Oh,
and
I
that's the only
don't know
change.
what they are.
They're courts, you are
Yeah,
correct. But
not mine.
There was no other changes in the plan.
By the way, thank you for having me, Mayor Regal, Vice Mayor Schaefer. All of you city council members, congratulations on your elections. Lisa, reelected, congratulations. Corey, welcome. Drew, we haven't met yet, but I'm Cindy. Chris, my councilman.
Maybe we say thank you for keeping it short, Madam Clerk.
Yeah,
If there are questions that come up with us, I know you've got
I'm
some
not
time
available
constraints.
after tonight.
So-
No, I can. Hey, listen,
So-
y'all have to put up with me for 6 more years. This has been a long year for me.
Okay, no questions?
Okay, if there is anything, we'll get back.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Cindy, you
for-
do an exceptional job. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it very
Oh,
much.
I would like to ask, do we know who the court liaison will be now that Mr. Rohr's the judge-elect?
Not yet, but I'll work on it.
Okay. Have a good evening, everyone.
Everyone's going to volunteer now that they see how fast your presentation is.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to item 19, which is consideration of ordinance number 19-71.
Ordinance
And
number
20.
nine, ordinance number 19-71, an ordinance amending ordinance number 18-111, establishing the pay and benefits for various part-time and intermittent and seasonal employees of the city of Delaware and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city. The emergency clause is required to enact the changes effective on December 25th, 2019. Therefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
So we'll, this will just be the first reading, a second reading. We'll plan to give a presentation about the pay plan. That'll be helpful for the new members in terms of what it covers and what you'll ultimately be voting on.
I believe the major change is just the annual percentage change on the different scales, and
we
matches
can-
up with the other contracts that you'll
We'll
be
plan to
seeing.
give a little more at the next meeting,
Okay.
given the hour.
All righty.
Same with 19 and 20, the same.
Yes.
What, might I just add a little clarification on 20, from the packet that you've received versus what is going to be in it next time? I'll be fast.
Okay.
Are we on 20?
Did you want me to read it first?
Sure.
Ordinance number 19-72, an ordinance amending the management, professional, technical, confidential, and supervisory employees pay plan and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, this ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city. The emergency clause is required to enact the changes effective on December 25th, 2019, which coincides with the new calendar year. Therefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I will be brief. I just wanted to update you. You have on front of your seats an amendment to this, which will be reflected in the next draft, and I just wanted to explain, to the extent anyone's watching or listening, and why the difference is. The draft that was in the packet strikes a lot of language from our insurance article. That was done in anticipation of possible changes coming in 2021, but given the fact that through 2020, we are not going to be making any insurance changes, we put that language back in. So the language you have will return a lot of that language. The only difference is we're closing a loophole which allowed people who had two spouses that worked for the city and one opted out of insurance, but when they opted out, all they were doing was joining their spouse's plan. They were getting the opt-out incentive, which really didn't make any sense because they actually were still on our insurance. So that's the only language that is going to change in the insurance article of note. And I just want to make you aware of that. It will be reflected in your next packet.
But they can only have one spouse, right? Because you said they have two spouses.
I bet-
Confused me.
Well, you never know. Yeah, no, there are two spouses total, but each
Okay,
one
thank
only
you.
gets one.
Thank you.
Good question.
Okay. 21's Finance Director's Report.
Thank you. The report through October was included in your packet. Most of the way through the year. We'll be monitoring pretty closely the rest of the way. Some of our expenditures, I think we're still in pretty good shape with the budget. Mentioned a couple times our health insurance plan. Expect a fairly significant year-end supplemental, but because of the self-funded nature of our plan, we do have reserves there to cover that. And every so often we're going to have a year where we have a lot of high costs, and this happened to be one of them. Other than that, I'd entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay, thanks, Dean. City Manager Report.
Real quickly, regarding the City Hall renovation project, we have shortlisted to 3 firms. Kyle's leading that effort. They will be interviewed, I think, in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll make a recommendation. They'll be making a recommendation to me, and we'll move forward with that project. We also have the Cicada reception, which is a week from yesterday, December 1st. And it's from 3 to 5.
You all have a
should receive invitations. This is the cultural art exchange program between Cicada and the City of Delaware. And I see Superintendent Kegla here tonight, and thank you for all of your efforts in making that a reality and working with our clerk on that project. So that's an exciting effort. I was part of a presentation with Councilwoman Keller last week at Willowbrook. We covered a number of bases, and I thought that went very well, and asked a lot of questions, a lot of good questions, and provided just kind of an update to them about things going on in the city. And we are out. We have Thursday and Friday off, and I'll be out of the office a little bit tomorrow and most of Wednesday. So that's all I have.
Okay. Council comments, Mr. Jones.
Just thank you for the kind words during the prayer for my son. I appreciate it very much. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Keller?
We wish Graham Jones all the positive support, and we'll be thinking about you, Chris, and checking in with you.
Thank you.
Take all the time you need to take good care of him, like I know you will. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone else, and to our hardworking staff who will be working anyway. Despite the turkey and Thanksgiving, we always need to remember our safety forces who won't be home, so that we can all be safe in our own homes. So, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Hoff?
I echo Councilmember Keller's comments regarding Councilmember Jones, and I would just like to thank the other council members that you have all been very helpful and supportive, as well as the staff, in acclimating us to this new duty. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Farrell?
Yep, I'll echo Mr. Hoffman. We've made it through one meeting and haven't broken the city, so feel good about that.
Good job.
Yeah, and other than that, happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Mr. Hellinger?
I have nothing.
Mr. Shaker? We did have a conference call today with Baumholder Germany, and they congratulated Chris and Lisa for your reelection, and they welcomed you two new members. They look forward to meeting you, and gave us some dates and their new plans in the next couple of years coming here. With that, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned at 9:05.